Contrary to what you might think, the curvy work of space-age chrome you see before you was not ripped from the side of a Dalek, nor swiped from the hand of a Jedi Knight, and it has never propelled a vessel through the void of space. No, it is in fact a vintage piece of audio recording equipment. I'm Alan D. Moore, and I'd like to introduce you to the Allied Electronics M3311 Dynamic Microphone. This mic was a gift from our family friend Tom Potter, who knows that I both like to record music and am a total sucker for vintage electronics. So, thank you very much, Tom. The mic is actually one of a pair, which came together in a velveteen-lined plastic case along with the desktop mic stands, adapters, and cables, all neatly arranged in a way that's slightly reminiscent of those sniper rifle cases you see in the movies. You know, where the guy takes it out and screws it together and does some terrible thing to somebody. Now, there's very little information available online about this microphone. Most of the info that I could find was from eBay auctions or estate sales or things like that. Then I discovered a website called AlliedCatalog.com, which has about 50 years of Allied Electronics catalogs scanned and viewable online. Awesome. So I managed to track down the debut entry for this microphone, which you see here. It was introduced in 1969. As you can see, it was advertised as an omnidirectional and suggested for use as a handheld or desktop mic. It has a frequency response range of 45 to 1500 hertz, 15,000 hertz, sorry, and 10,000 ohm impedance. It costs about $20 for one, which is $136 in today's money, or $50 for the kit, such as I have, which is about $340 today. This is a two-conductor mic, so it does not have an XLR plug. It is what we call low impedance and unbalanced. Now, sadly, my kit did not have the spec sheet included, but fortunately I found one on the internet. Someone doing an online auction had posted a photograph that was still kind of readable of the spec sheet, and you see it here. Let's look at the frequency response. The frequency response, it's steeply rolled off below 100 hertz. It's flat until about 1100 hertz. And then it has a nice bump between 2 and 8 kilohertz and rolls off after 15. This is pretty typical of a vocal microphone. Something you might see in, say, the Shure SM58. In fact, it's pretty close to the frequency response that's published for the SM58. What is not typical about this is that it is non-directional or omnidirectional, depending on whether you're reading the spec sheet or the catalog entry. I was a little skeptical of this at first. It just didn't seem like that made any sense. But as you'll see later, it is actually an omnidirectional mic. A little strange for that application. It is low impedance, as I said, and it's unbalanced. Most modern equipment is either low impedance and balanced, or high impedance and unbalanced. So this could create a problem when we're trying to hook it up and record with it. Now, as I mentioned before, and as you saw in the catalog, this was being sold in a kit with dual mics, and that kind of suggested to me like a matched stereo pair, something you would use for ambience miking or distance miking a large group. That might be an application, but the desktop stands kind of belie that, as does the frequency response, which looks more like a vocal mic or a PA mic. Here you're going to see it's got kind of a weird and obsolete connector. This is called an Amphenol Series 80 connector. Wikipedia says these were popular between the 30s and the 80s. They can either have 2 pins, which I think makes it a Series 80, or 1 pin, which I think makes it a Series 90. I'm not real sure about that. Fortunately, the other end of this cable that it comes with terminates in a standard 1/4-inch tip sleeve phono plug, so that can plug right into, say, the unbalanced inputs on my mixer board or a guitar amp or something like that. So when I first got this microphone, I was pretty excited to try it out, just to see what kind of cool vintage tones I got out of it. So I attached the included cable, plugged it into the nearest 1/4-inch input, and got nothing. No sound whatsoever. I fiddled with it a little bit, tried to figure out the problem, but I just put it back in the box and decided to attempt it later. Later on, when I got some time, Now, one of the cables was actually in pieces. I should state that now. So I really only had one good cable, at least as far as appearances were going. But after I probed it with a multimeter, I discovered it had a short in it. So I unscrewed first the 1/4-inch connector, and things looked fine there, but when I unscrewed the amphenol connector, as you can see, I just saw some bare wires there, and they were kind of twisted up, so it seemed like this was the spot maybe where it was shorting out. I slapped a little electrical tape around each wire and closed it up, and it seemed to test good with the multimeter. I was maybe a little hasty there, but I plugged it in, and once again, no sound. I tried the other mic, and again, no sound. So, I was a little frustrated at this point, but I wasn't going to give up. So next, we had to go into the microphone itself. I unscrewed all the screws. It's held together by 4 screws, and then the switch is held on by 2. I opened this up and started to inspect it, probing it with the multimeter again, and find that there was a broken solder joint. And as you can see, it's way down in the lower barrel. Yeah, I tried for about an hour to figure out how to get that plug off the end. Just didn't have a lot of luck. It seems to have a 5/8-inch nut on it, but it won't turn for anything even after soaking it in WD-40 and trying with all my might. I tried to twist or push out the inner plastic piece, and it wouldn't budge, so ultimately I gave up. There's no way I can get a soldering iron down into that barrel, so not much I can do here. When I checked out the second mic, it looked good. There were no broken wires, all the solder joints were tight, and it seemed to test well with the multimeter. So I put it back together, and I still wasn't getting any sound. But I double-checked the cable, and it seems like it was still shorted out. Well, rather than mess with a possibly good cable, I decided to take the one that was already broken and see if I could reattach that end on it. But when I stripped off the wire, you can see here, it's just covered with some kind of black, sticky gunk. It's almost like the insulation on the inside on the hot wire has just melted away and just turned to goo. So no wonder this thing is shorted out. I think the cable was basically a loss, and no big loss really. It's not super great cable. I managed to scare up a spare piece of unbalanced cable, and actually with a 1/4-inch cable already attached to the end. I fired up the soldering iron, and after about an hour of frustration, I had it soldered onto the end pretty tolerably. I don't know what it is about old metal. It just doesn't want to take solder. It's just like it's been there, done that. Got the t-shirt, doesn't want to get back together with a wire. I don't know, but eventually I got something that was ugly but held together. Now that I'd fixed the cable, double and triple checked it to make sure there were no shorts, I plugged it in. I plugged in the mic, and we had sound. No, actually we had sound because it's a really, really quiet microphone. Yeah, I guess because it's unbalanced and low impedance, boy, it really is a quiet microphone. I plugged it first into my Mackie 1202's unbalanced inputs and cranked the trim all the way up and got just a really loud hum and still very quiet sound. So next I tried a passive direct injection box. That cut out the hum. It was still very quiet, but for now that's how I'm using it because, well, it works. Now I want to talk a bit about that broken mic. I noticed that when I was taking it apart, the capsule actually has 4 conductors leading out of it. That's interesting because only 2 of them were being used. I've read that on some mics of this era, instead of the 2-pin output, they actually had 4 pins. And what that would do is, depending on which pins you connected, you'd either have a balanced or an unbalanced signal. So you connect pins 1 and 2, you got unbalanced. You connect pins 1, 3, and 4, you've got a balanced signal. Is it possible? Could I be that lucky? Could I have a mic that I could convert to a balanced mic? I may have to play with that if I can't repair that mic in some other way. If you've got any ideas or suggestions, please let me know in the comments. So, now that we have this mic working, how does it sound? Well, Okay, so I'm now speaking to you from the Allied Electronics M3311 Dynamic Microphone. And if you compare this to my previous audio, which was on an AT3035 condenser mic, you might note that my voice sounds a bit thinner, maybe a bit brighter. There's kind of a raspier quality to this sound, which is typical of a dynamic mic. One other thing to note is I've had to put a pillow behind this and kind of a towel underneath it because without those things, this being an omnidirectional microphone, it picks up some pretty nasty reflections, which makes me think it's kind of a strange choice of a pattern for a microphone that's meant to sit on a desk. Here, let me take away the pillow and the towel. Just listen to the difference here. Okay, so now I've taken those things away. I've got this on a bare wooden desk, and my monitor and the wall is just maybe about a foot behind the mic, and it's just kind of tin can sounding, There's a lot of reflections coming in. Despite the stands that they come with, this is not really a great mic to set on a desk and talk into. You're going to get a lot of really bad off-axis sound. But it is interesting that it's omnidirectional. And let's just test that real quick. So I'm going to move my head around here to the side. I'm now talking to you from the side of the microphone. And over to the other side of the microphone. And now I'm behind the microphone. Now, the sound is much brighter. The frequency response is better in front of the microphone, and the manual did say that. But it does pick up sound from 360 degrees around the microphone, which is pretty interesting. Tell you what, let me put this pillow back here. Now, I wanted to try out this microphone with some different instruments. Let's just pop it on a few different things and see what it sounds like, all right? Okay, back to the AT3035. So, that's maybe not all the instruments you'd want to record in your studio, but, it gives you a good idea of the character of this mic. Having played with this mic a little bit, what's my final verdict? On a scale of blah to wow, I'm going to give it a solid, it's a bit of a puzzler. Now, I wouldn't want to use it on anything where I had a lot of bass content. It's not going to be a good mic for my cajon. It's not going to be a good mic for a kick drum or a bass amp. I don't particularly like the way my vocals sound on this. Sometimes you want that dynamic sound on a vocal, but I've got better mics for that. I do find the omnidirectional aspect of it compelling. There might be a situation, let's say I got an instrument that I'm going to close mic, but I want a bit of that room sound sneaking in there. The fact that the on-axis sound is a lot more present than the off-axis sound means that I can get that close mic sound, but get a good amount of that room sneaking in there. Of course, you got to be careful. You probably have to lay down carpet or put a towel on the floor because you don't want that floor reflection coming in and making a nasty out-of-phase sound. But if you got a decent room, something with some good ambience, and you want a little bit of that in there, but you also want that close mic sound, this might just be the mic to do it. I'm going to have to try it with that. I like the way it sounded on the guitar amp, for instance. It might be a nice mic for, say, some very trebly percussion, like a tambourine or something like that. Overall, though, this isn't a workhorse mic. It's just a specialty mic. Well, that's all for this adventure with the Allied Electronics M3311 non-directional dynamic microphone. Thank you once again to our friend Tom for the microphones. And if you've enjoyed this video, please click subscribe so you can keep up with our next adventure. Until then, I'm Alan D. Moore. God bless.